I'm Tom Hylton. Welcome to another episode of The Making of Pottstown. I'm here with Dave Kerns, lifelong Pottstown resident, except for 4 years in the Navy, and president of the Pottstown Historical Society. And today we'll be talking about a fascinating aerial photo of Pottstown taken on August 2nd of 1926. It's a very high definition photo, so we'll be able to talk about very many businesses and stores and schools that were in Pottstown in 1926. Some are still there. So this aerial photo was taken on August 2nd, 1926. We were able to get it from the Hagley Museum in Delaware. We learned about it from Todd Bainbridge, who has a website called the Pottstown History Collective. So you can see Pottstown was surrounded by open space, which is not today. Although there are 19,000 people in Pottstown, almost as many as live here today, many areas of Pottstown were not developed, and we're going to go through that as we go around Pottstown in a semi-circular fashion. So as you know, Dave Kerns is here with us, Pottstown's premier historian, and he's going to describe some of the things we're going to see. So I'm going to start here with the Schuylkill River, which is right here. And then we have the Schuylkill Canal. You want to tell us a little bit about the Schuylkill Canal, Dave?
Well, the Schuylkill Canal was put together in like 1815, somewhere in there. Don't quote me on the exact years because, that's not going to happen. But right around 1815, it was organized, and it was a series of pools along the river, and it was supposed to connect with the Union Canal, which went over to the Susquehanna then. Unfortunately, all the rivers in our area go north and south, and they wanted transportation east and west. And the biggest thing with the canal was they wanted to go to Pottsville because of the coal regions and bring the coal down from Pottsville. And I guess the heyday was really in the 30s, maybe early 40s. Other than that, it was a struggle.
And how was it that it disappeared?
Well, it disappeared. They filled in, some of it was filled in the 50s. Some of it wasn't. Some local people fished in it and swam in it. But by the 60s, the 422 bypass took care of most of the canal because that's what they ran it on.
So here we are in what is on South Hanover Street, and this is what's today South Pottstown. And then as we cross the Hanover Street Bridge into Pottstown, you want to tell us about why that bridge isn't there anymore?
Well, believe it or not, it used to be a covered bridge. The original bridge was built in 1851 as a wooden covered bridge. That burnt down, they say, in incinerary. And then in 1886, they put that one up. Phoenix Iron built it and put it up. And then, for years, the bridge was 100 years old. And they were trying to replace it. They talked about it for about 6 years in the newspapers and never came to any conclusion until the 72 flood, when their decision was made for them. And that's why we have the existing bridge now, which was, I might add, was raised higher for flood purposes.
So as we cross now into Pottstown, here's a building that's still here. This is now the Environmental Education Center for the Montgomery County Community College and the home of the Schuylkill River Greenway Association. So this was a PICO building. Those are PICO transformers. And you want to talk us about what this big tank is?
That's a gas tank. It's like a balloon. It goes up and down. Suburban Electric is who built it because before that the borough facility was not enough to support the population and growth of the town. They used to be along the railroad. The old power plant system used to be here along the railroad. Then they sold out to, in 24, I think it was, they sold out to Suburban Electric, and they built this plant. Well, actually, it was before that, because this plant was built in 1912. They needed more. The gas facilities weren't enough, so Suburban built this in 24, and in 1963 they tore it down for urban renewal. It held 500,000 cubic feet of gas, so it was big.
Yes. So this is a building that's still here. The roller mill?
The Pottstown roller mills. It's an apartment house now. The roller mills go back quite a ways. Nobody's sure exactly, I don't think, of the date. They put it back around 1725, something like that. It was used as a flour mill for a long time. This is an addition that was put on it in the 1880s. This would be, I don't know, I've read where the original mill was tore down to build this in the very early 1800s. So I'm not so sure this is the original mill. But everything's sketchy on that, so I'm not going to say for sure.
So this is where the Hanover Street townhouses are now, but it was two different things. Once it was Mrs. Smith's Pie Company manufacturing plant, and you want to talk about what it was originally? Here's this building is still here, the Meyerhoff Shirt Factory, which was turned into apartments about 3 years ago. So why don't you describe what's here?
Well, this building here is the old Potts Brothers, which goes back to the 1840s. Later on it became Nagel Steel, and then when this is right around, this is pretty much the time frame. It would be in 27 when they did the $1 million renewal over in here, and that would change all this because the cold storage had to move from over here, and they bought Nagel Steel and they tore it all down and built their cold storage over there, which later was one of the first buildings that the Smith Pies went into when they took that over. What happened is in the 60s we had a big urban renewal called Water Street and South Hanover Street. And everything you see here just about went by the wayside. They tore all this section down and everything along Water Street and up Hanover Street, all the houses and buildings that were there. And Mrs. Smith Pies bought a lot of it. The Pottstown Plating bought some down on Washington there at Water Street. Well, they called Water Street, we call Industrial Highway now. You can't really see it, but there's the passenger stations there for the Pennsylvania Railroad. And yeah, this is Meyerhoff, and this was Faro Box, and then they made a deal somewhere along the line with Aurora Knitting, and they kind of switched buildings.
So we should point out, this was the Pennsylvania Railroad right here.
Exactly.
Where Industrial Highway and College Drive is, and then up here, this was the Reading Railroad. Mm-hmm. So there were two railroads, and this was Pennsylvania passenger station, and then the Reading, it hasn't been built yet, or the one that's the original one was.
It's the original one there now.
It was around here.
It's there. I have to think where it is.
I think this is it here.
Yeah, that's the station, and this is the freight. Well, this It's not a freight because the freight station's over actually here.
So we're going to go up Hanover Street, and this building is still here. That's the Security Trust Bank, where the Blue Elephant restaurant is now on the first floor, and this is High Street.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see there's angle parking on High Street. You see the cars parked there. So now we're going to go west on High Street, and we're going to cross the Manatoni Creek. And this is the northern part of Montgomery County Community College. You want to describe what was there at the time?
Yeah, this building here is the original brewery building that was built by Selinger when he moved from Glasgow. Then, when he sold out and it became Pottstown Brewery, they built these buildings. This is what they used as the Pottstown Brewery, and Vaughn Knitting was over here next to it. Then in '53, Kiwi Shoe Polish took this over, and they were there for till 1979 when they moved out to Douglasville.
So here's the bridge over the Manatoni Creek, and this is where the carousel is now, this area. Mm-hmm. And then this is Pottsgrove Manor.
That is Pottsgrove Manor.
Which had a barn with it on the other side of King Street.
That burnt down, yes.
So let's talk about this huge complex right here.
Well, this is basically where 100 would go across right about here. This is a bridge. This is Eastern Steel at this point in time. It started out as Warwick Furnace. It was a small operation. This, in 1900, capitalists from Philadelphia took it over, and they built this big complex here called Eastern Steel. They also had the slag. They had another outfit in there that took the slag and made paving blocks out of it. But this bridge here was built in 1906, and it was for the work. There was a path there on it for the workers to go back and forth because they built houses. These are the houses they built over here for the workers, and they would go back and forth. And then there was a part of the bridge where they could cart the slag over here. They bought this farm, and I can't remember the name of the farm, but this was a farm that they bought so that they could put their slag over here.
And this is obviously another slag heap.
Yep. Well, there's a lot of slag deposits from the process that they were doing.
So this is today's Riverfront Park where you see the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the pedestrian bridge would be.
Yes.
And this is all wooded.
Right, it's all woods now.
And then the Pennsylvania Railroad is now mostly the Keystone Boulevard and the Greenway.
Right.
So it was interesting how you described what they called this area.
The Valley of Death, yeah. And also,
and why did they call it that?
Well, because so many men died in those factories in the 1800s. There was no protection of any kind. Steel would smack them, in the process and kill them, or they'd get killed on the railroad tracks or something like that. This is actually when Eastern Steel actually moved the Manatoni Creek. It was actually over this way. They moved it east, the course of the creek east, which would have been over this way. So the creek evidently ran over here somewhere at one time, and they moved it over. Yeah, this is Eastern Steel, which was the Warwick, which was that was the first factory that went up. Jacob Fegley owned all this land, so all these plants were bought. And Fegley was actually a president of the Warwick, and this would probably be Solder Brothers, Boiler Works, and all these stacks that you see, upright stacks here, that would be Ellis and Lessick Nail and Steel Company. And I think this would be the Glasgow Iron Company, which was a part of the Pottstown Iron Company.
So this whole area is slowly being redeveloped.
Yes.
As I said, here's Keystone Boulevard, and which gave access for the first time to these to this area. Everything's been torn down.
Well, if you go back to the bridge going over there, right there, that's the Colebrookdale Railroad, and it kind of goes off there. This is the switch tower that made the switch for the trains. And if you think about it, right through here is where you go through the underpass to come up to High Street, because it comes up right there by the bridge.
On College Drive.
On College Drive. So it would have been right through here. And then you have 100 going across right here too. So that took care of Eastern Steel property pretty much.
So here's the carousel, and this is Memorial Park. It wasn't Memorial Park in 1926. You want to talk about that?
It was owned by the Gable brothers. Bought Mill Park, which we know as Pottsgrove Manor, and their estate, which is Fitzsimmons and a couple other names that I can't come up with right now, but they owned all this property, everything. They owned all this stuff and all the racetrack and up to where the hangars are. This was all owned by that estate. After the Gable brothers were deceased, their relatives took it over, and they didn't even live in the area. So when they wanted to, in 1918, when they wanted to turn this into a memorial park because of the veterans in World War I, they had to actually go down and talk to these people about selling it, and it wasn't easy because they didn't really want to sell it. But the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club started it, but then the Depression came along, and they kind of gave it up, and then later on the Kiwanis Club took it over, and they are the ones that are responsible for buying this section, and it was bought in sections. It was not bought all at one time.
And these are now houses.
Yep.
And this is now where the Walmart is and that shopping center.
The shopping center. This is the Pottstown Speedway. Very interesting races there. Open cockpit cars. It was never really banked right, so there was a lot of accidents. It used to have wooden fences around it. This looks like the grandstand. The hangar, the one hangar at the airport was an exhibition building, but I guess the races went from about 1919. Well, it was horse racing before that. The auto racing was from about 1919 to 1926, 27. By 1932, all that was plowed over. Nobody could get the funds together to make the track work, and you had Hatfield and Reading Fairgrounds, which were more improved tracks, and that's where most of the racers went.
So, out of the picture would be Stowe, and would be Penn Village, which is now Bright Hope, Barth Elementary School. All of that is to the left of what we can see here in this picture. Now if we move up here, this is Route 100 would be going along here.
Yeah, that was built in the 50s.
And this was all open land that has been filled in with housing since then. The Lincoln Elementary School would be up in this area, hadn't been built yet. And then this would be up here, this would be Upper and Lower Pottsgrove.
Yes.
And
That's probably like, that could be like Ringing Hill up in there.
So the area north of Prospect Street wasn't part of Pottstown in 1926. It was annexed later on, I think in 1930, from Upper and Lower Pottsgrove. And so Franklin Elementary School hadn't been built at that time either. Now, one building that you can see, I think this is the Sweetore Mill right here, Dave.
Where, here?
Yep.
Yeah, it could be. It looks like it's in the right place. It would be on 6th Street. They're now apartments. I stayed in one of them when we had the fire. We stayed in a couple of months. We lived in Sweetore. Bowdoin owned that at one time and did uniforms out of there.
This is the Pottstown Cemetery, obviously still there. And this area of Pottstown was already built by 26. This is the island, what's now the Memorial Park Island.
And if you see these buildings here with the smokestack, that's 2nd Street in Manitonia. That would be the Bird and Ice Cream Factory right there. There's row houses there now.
And then moving up here, Franklin, the North End and Franklin Elementary School, all built in the 50s and 60s?
That would be the 50s, yes. Actually, the North End really started to boom about the 1940, after World War II. It started to boom up there. That's when you see a lot of stuff being built up to the north.
And then, as far as I can tell, this area, I get my bearings from the reservoir. The original reservoir is here.
Yes.
And there's 2 reservoirs now. They're both above ground, huge green tanks.
Yep.
And Second Baptist Church would be here. And
Yes.
Chicken Hill is here.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the original Jefferson School. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's pretty new at this point. It was built, I think, in 22. So it's a fairly new building. Before that, I was telling Tom that they had an encampment there back in World War I. They had the National Guard encamped there for a couple of days before they took off for the war. This reservoir here, people wouldn't believe that goes back to the 1860s when they built that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's old. It was old. They cleaned it up a couple times. They emptied it and cleaned it a couple of times.
And I think this is where Franklin Fields are now. The middle school and the high school are here, which weren't built in 26.
Right. That property was all owned by Doc Porter. He sold off all that land for the school and stuff.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he bought the Sampson farm out there, and him and the borough went round and round over that because of sewer systems and all that, and improvements, curbing and all that.
So this is a very prominent building. You want to talk about this one? Because it's still here.
It's still there. I think around 1916 this was built. It was built as a tire factory. It eventually got in the hands of Sam Porter and Doc Porter, and there was and Feist, and they had a big squabble. They actually had the police there, and it was a mess. But it finally got settled, and some of this building Ludwig Motors leased out or bought and owned during the war. During the war, when they couldn't make cars, and they used to store stuff over there. And this was built as a cigar factory around 1900. And later on, Merkel Motorcycle was in there for a year or two. We have pictures of a Merkel motorcycle right along here on Hanover Street.
And of course, you can see this is the still part of the Pottstown Cemetery between Hanover Street and Charlotte. And the smokestack has been torn down, and the water tower.
Yes.
And this is now just being the early stages of turning this all into apartments.
Yes.
And then down here you can see St. Al's Elementary School and St. Al's Church.
This here is a planing mill. Eventually, Ludwig's bought that. That was a planing mill. Now I think it's Magic Sleeper.
Ah. So here's St. Al's, and this is what's now called the Beach Street Factory.
Right, that was a shirt factory. That was built as a shirt factory, and I can't think of the name of it, but it was built as a shirt factory.
And then Facera's bought it.
Facera's bought it as a warehouse.
Let's just orient ourselves again. So now we're going up Beach Street to what is now the Lincoln School. And over here is the Hill School.
Right. You can see here this would be the bend at Madison Street, and up here would be the bend at Kime Street on High Street, so to give you an idea where you're at.
So, and this is St. James.
That would be the new St. James, yes. The old St. James would have been back here where Green Street is.
Oh, that's the building the Hill School bought.
Yeah, but that's not the building that it was. It was actually on the back side of that building, up on the hill, is where St. James was. Then they bought this property and moved over here. And right about this time, they're building St. John's over here.
So this is interesting. This is Rosedale, or what became Rosedale.
Yeah.
And here's, I think it's Rosedale Drive and Highland Road up here.
Yeah, that's a little tough to actually figure out what that is, exactly what street. This, I would say, is Ron's Hill, and Sunnybrook. They just built the pool in '26, so the pool's, you can't see the pool because it's hidden in the valley there. But the swimming pool was brand new in '26.
And this is St. Al's Old Cemetery here on High Street. And as we come down here, we see the Rupert School area. Rupert School has not been built yet.
No.
So this all area has to be filled in.
That would come the following year. And this here would be Dana Corporation. You can see the Sawtooth buildings that are along Kime Street here. One of these buildings, and I believe it's this one, was the Chadwick Engineering, which eventually they would tear down, Dana would tear down in the 50s and enclose into their building. And this is part of Dana here. Down here we have, well, that's the bridge works down there. And you know, let's see, I'm trying to figure out this. This is all Bethlehem Steel here. Immense. It's amazing how much property they had. Pottstown Iron Company started in the Civil War era, and expanded and kept expanding. Went through receiverships and things like that, but you know, they kept going.
So this is the Reading Railroad here.
Yes.
And this is the Pennsylvania.
Right.
And these houses are Maple Street.
I would say probably Maple Street. And if you go over here, you see the wooden bridge that is Moser Road. That's Moser Road would be, that would be probably Moser Road right there. And there's the bridge going across. This would be New Crete Products, cement products, and over here might be remains of the Yost farm yet. But this is the old wooden bridge that goes over Moser Road. And that's the only way you could get there because there was no Firestone Boulevard at that time. 1945 before they built that. Yeah, you see they've already expanded all the way over pretty much, but there's still more. I don't know, they're almost right up to this bridge. So they must be expanding more here yet. We passed over. This is the March Brownback Stove Works here, and what these were the Reading Railroad facilities, their machine shop and foundry, before March Brownback took over. And then in the renewal area, when I talked about the Water Street renewal and all, that's when Mrs. Smith bought all that and tore all those buildings down and put their foil division there.
So now we'll go back up to High Street, having made a circle around the town. And we can see here the Bar Arcade. You want to talk about that?
The Bar Arcade was tore down in '73. It was built in 1901 as the auditorium building. It's called the Bar Arcade, which is what most people know it as, because Jacob Barr bought it, and he had his insurance offices in it in the upstairs. And of course, this is the farmers market, which was the original part that was built first, and then this part was built. One of our old movie theaters used to be in this building called the Princess, one of the early on ones. And when Barr came in and made the arcade, he altered the whole building and put that tunnel through it like the arcade. And that's why we call it the Bar Arcade, because he's the one that put that tunnel through there and altered it.
And this is the Block Brothers building, which then became known as the Levitz building, which recently has been sold and is going to be turned into apartments. And then up here, there's two interesting buildings you might want to talk about, Dave.
Well, the one is the First Presbyterian Church. They tore the original down and built this one, and of course in the 1960s, this was all tore down for a parking lot, and they moved out to the north end. This is the old YMCA, which would have been King and Evans, and that they built onto that a couple of times. There used to be there was an old building on that corner that was there for years and years, where they did bottling and livery stables and stuff like that. This is the light manufacturing that Grubb had, where he built bicycles, and then he went into automobile parts and stuff. And this would be the building that Doler Jarvis would buy this building in 1924 from light manufacturing, and that in turn would move down along Queen Street over this way, over in this area.
So this is South Washington Street right here?
This is right at the bridge. This is the one that burnt down, so many years ago, where all the stainless steel sits out in the yard. But that was originally built as light foundry.
And this building?
That is the synagogue, which is pretty much brand new at that time. I think they dedicated it that year, 26. So it's brand new.
And this is where the post office is today, but it wasn't there in 1926.
Now that would have been the Mills house, Ellis Mills residence. We have pictures of that.
And the post office is where the library is today, which would be right here.
Yes, that's the well, the library's there. The library was put there in 1916.
No, it was the post office.
The post office,
And the
yes.
library moved in the 60s.
Yeah, that's right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay. So now,
Got ahead of myself on that one.
yeah, so here's downtown Pottstown, and here's another brand new building about 1926.
Yes, they started building that in 24. I think in 25 it is. I think is the year that it was dedicated.
That's
the Mercury
the
building.
Mercury building, right?
They used to be over here. This is the old news building, which still stands. Has a little tower there. It's vacant right now.
Now, why don't you explain about this church? If you look carefully, you can see it's burnt out.
Yeah, this is the Trinity Church. 1926, June of 1926. It used to have a big tower on it with a gold ball on top, which they still have the gold ball in their history part. The lightning struck the gold ball and burnt the whole roof and everything off of this, and just the shell was there. And that after that happened, the borough passed an ordinance on the height you could have, which this is the Phillies firehouse, and you can see they had a really tall tower. And the reason they had the tall tower was they used to hang their hoses after a fire to dry out, and they would hang them from the top all the way down. But they had to cut that off, and the bar arcade. They had a. I don't know if you can see it on this one, but the bar arcade had a tall tower too, and they had to cut that one down too. There wasn't a lot of places that had to do it. The Phillies was the big one, and then the bar arcade. They're the two I can remember that they had to take their towers down to a certain footage.
Now, this is what's now the Verizon building here.
Yes.
And then on the other side, you can only see the roof, is Borough Hall.
That's Borough Hall. That's just brand new at that point in time, built in 24.
And then there's a very big building right next to it.
This is the Opera House. The Opera House was built in 1869. It wasn't the Opera House. It was built as a market house. It had 54 stalls in it, because what they wanted to do was they wanted to get vendors off the streets, so that they built this to get them off the streets. Up on top was the Oddfellows and the Masons. They had the upper floor. And then later on, it was renovated. They tore the whole second story out of it and made it one big open place. And at one time, it had a skating rink in it.
Wow.
You can't see the Armory building by it. It kind of conceals that, but that's probably the back of the Armory building there, which was built in 1907. That's where they would have drilled back there. Not only did they drill back there, but that's where the home shows were done in the beginning, and they had auto shows in there also.
And that church there?
That's First Baptist Church. That's still there, although their tower is lowered too, but not because of restrictions, mainly because it was coming apart and nobody could fix it.
So here's a shiny new building.
That would be the high school, built in 22. They took out several houses in that block. I forget how many buildings it was altogether. Something like 13 that they tore down to build this high school. and then it became the Central Junior High School, and now it's a parking lot.
And then behind here, which you can't see because of all the trees,
Well, the high school would be here, I guess. Wait a minute, what am I looking at here?
Yeah,
that's
you're right.
Beach
That's the
Street.
high
So
school.
right there would be the high school, and in between here would be the Washington School in the back, and then it's 26. Actually, the Jackson School was still there at that time, I believe. And then you had the Richards School. In '49, the Richards School burnt down and took the back wall of the high school with it. This high school with it.
So the original high school was here, and then when they built the new high school, this became a junior high, and then the Washington Elementary School was here.
Yes, and
Now,
that. Yes.
It's interesting. A town of almost 20,000 people, and there are no parking lots in this town. Today, 15% of Pottstown is parking lots, and another 9% is roads. So a quarter of the town is either buildings or parking lots, and yet then there were none. And because the only schools, elementary schools that are big enough to see, really are the new school, which is now Jefferson School. But throughout the town, believe it or not, there was a total of 15 elementary schools in Pottstown in 1926. Most of them were little two-story buildings, a classroom on the first floor and a classroom on the second floor.
And they built them for $1,000.
Is that right?
Yeah, most of them were built for $1,000. There's still a lot of them standing. They're apartments.
Yeah, why don't you describe where a couple of them are?
Well, if we could go to Washington Hill there, by the Jefferson School, up that way, I think. Where's Washington? Washington Street comes up. There's one on the top there. Now there used to be two of them there. Now there's only one. They were actually, when they were built, they were actually in the Pottsgroves, and then Pottstown inherited them. There's two over on Chestnut Street. They're by Noddle's Auto Parts, where Noddle's Auto Parts used to be, and they go back to the Civil War. It's amazing that those buildings are still there. I'm impressed that they're still there. Right across the street where the playground is where the original Franklin School, I think it was the Franklin or Jefferson, one of those two. The original one was before they built the new ones. And of course, down on South Evans Street where the playground is, there at Cherry Street, there was two schools that stood there. But we have one on North York Street that's apartments. We have one on State Street where the billiard place used to be, Miller and Muller.
Mm-hmm.
That was a school. And if you go up where Dana is, up on top of the hill, there's a school that sits there that's still standing. So there's quite a few. I don't know if I hit them all, but there's quite a few buildings that are still standing, and they go back into the 1800s. Well, every one of them goes back into the 1800s.
So they were really neighborhood elementary schools.
They were really neighborhood elementary schools.
Is there anything, Dave, that we've missed that you want to talk about?
Well, I think we've pretty much covered most everything. You're putting me on the spot, and I'm trying to figure out if there is anything. But I think we've covered pretty much of it. You know, you could go forever, but I think we covered the most important ones, Tom.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Dave. I really appreciate it.